The stars looked different from the bridge of the ESV Defiance. Captain Jake Morrison stood with his hands behind his back, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace through the main viewport. His ship was humanity's pride, the first vessel capable of crossing the galaxy in weeks rather than centuries. But pride meant nothing now. They were heading into unknown territory, summoned by beings who considered themselves the masters of all known space. "Coming up on Axis Prime in 5 minutes, Captain," said Lieutenant Chris Walker from his station. The young tactical officer looked nervous. Everyone on the bridge did. Jake nodded. "Drop us out of hyperspace at the designated coordinates. Let's not give them any reason to get trigger-happy." Dr. Lisa Chang stepped up beside him. The xenolinguist had spent the last 3 weeks studying every piece of data they had on the Galactic Council. It wasn't much. Humanity had only made first contact 6 months ago, and the Council had been secretive from the start. "Do you think they'll listen to reason?" Lisa asked quietly. Jake didn't answer right away. He had been in the military for 20 years, served in 3 wars, and commanded ships through situations that should have killed everyone aboard. His instincts were screaming at him now, the same way they had before every major battle. Something was wrong. "I think," he said slowly, "that we're about to find out just how alone we really are out here." The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. The view changed instantly. Instead of swirling colors, they now faced a massive planet that gleamed like a pearl against the darkness of space. Dozens of orbital stations surrounded it, each one larger than Earth's biggest cities. Hundreds of ships moved between them, vessels of designs Jake had never seen before. "Receiving a transmission," Walker reported. "They're directing us to dock at Station 7. Take us in, nice and slow." Ambassador Nina Clark was already waiting in the docking bay when Jake arrived. She was a tall woman, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much of politics. Behind her stood Admiral Kyle Bennett, the head of Earth's United Space Command. The old man looked grim. "Captain," Nina said, "are you ready for this?" "As ready as I'll ever be, ma'am." They walked together through the docking tube and into the station. Jake had expected something impressive, maybe even beautiful. What he saw instead made his stomach turn. The walls were covered in symbols he didn't recognize, but the meaning was clear enough. These were warnings, threats, reminders of power. 2 alien guards waited for them. They were tall and thin, with gray skin and too many joints in their arms. They didn't speak, just gestured for the humans to follow. The council chamber was enormous. 12 thrones sat in a circle, each one occupied by a different alien species. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that Jake's mind struggled to process what he was seeing. At the center throne sat the council leader, a being called Zarthek. He belonged to the Velkari Empire, the most powerful species in the council. Zarthek rose slowly. When he spoke, a translator device made his words understandable. "Humans, you stand before the Galactic Council. For 10,000 years, we have maintained order and peace across this galaxy. We have rules, protocols, sacred laws that all species must follow." Nina stepped forward. "We came here in peace. We only want to silence." Zarthek's voice was cold. "You will speak when given permission. Your species has violated 47 protocols since making first contact. You have expanded too quickly, built ships without authorization, claimed worlds that were not yours to take. You have shown no respect for council authority." Jake felt his jaw clench. Beside him, Admiral Bennett's face was turning red. "Therefore," Zarthek continued, "the council has made a decision. Humanity will surrender all faster-than-light technology immediately. You will dismantle your space fleet. You will accept status as a protected primitive species. Council observers will be placed on your homeworld to ensure compliance." The chamber fell silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Nina took another step forward. Her voice was steady. Several of the council members made sounds that the translator didn't bother to interpret. Zarthek tilted his head, as if the question confused him. Refuse? No species refuses the Council. That is not possible. Refuse. I'm making it possible right now, Nina said. Humanity will never surrender our freedom. We will never accept slavery, disguised as protection. We came to the stars on our own strength. We'll stay here the same way. End quote. The chamber erupted. Aliens shouted in languages the translator couldn't keep up with. Zarthek raised one long arm, and silence fell again. You do not understand your position, human. We have destroyed species for less than what you suggest. We have turned entire worlds to ash. We are offering you mercy. We don't want your mercy. Admiral Bennett growled. We want to be left alone. Zarthek was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his words were filled with something that sounded almost like pity. Very well. You have 30 standard days to reconsider. If you do not comply, we will take corrective action. Your species will learn what happens to those who defy the Council. This audience is ended. Guards surrounded them immediately, escorting them back to the docking bay. No one spoke until they were back on the Defiance. The moment the airlock sealed, Nina turned to Jake and Kyle. Get us out of here. Now. Jake was already moving toward the bridge. Walker, plot a course for Earth. Maximum speed. As the ship accelerated away from Axis Prime, Jake stood at the viewport again. Behind them, the Council's capital grew smaller. Ahead lay Earth, home to 8 billion people who had no idea what was coming. Lisa appeared at his side again. Do you think they'll really attack us? Jake thought about Zarthek's words, about the way the other Council members had looked at them. Like humans were insects. Problems to be stepped on. Yeah, he said quietly. They will. And when they do, we're going to have to make a choice. We can surrender and lose everything that makes us human. Or we can fight, even if it kills us. What do you think Earth will choose? Jake smiled, but there was no humor in it. I think, he said, that they're about to learn something about humanity that scares me almost as much as it should scare them. We don't know how to quit. Even when we should. The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying them toward Earth. Toward home. Toward war. The 30 days passed faster than anyone wanted. Earth's governments held emergency sessions. News broadcasts showed nothing but debates about the Council's ultimatum. Some people wanted to surrender, to accept whatever terms kept humanity alive. Most wanted to fight, but wanting to fight and being able to win were two very different things. Admiral Kyle Bennett stood in the war room deep beneath Geneva, looking at the holographic display that showed Earth's solar system. Red dots marked Council ships. There were 200 of them, arranged in a perfect formation just beyond Saturn's rings. They had arrived exactly on time, precisely 30 days after the ultimatum. They're hailing us, said Commander Ben Harris. The fighter pilot looked eager for action, but his eyes showed concern. Everyone knew the odds. Kyle touched a control and the Council leader's face appeared on the screen. Zarthek looked exactly as he had 30 days ago. Cold. Certain. Humans. Your time has expired. Transmit your surrender now. Or face the consequences. Kyle took a deep breath. Behind him, every officer in the room was watching. He thought about his grandchildren back home in California. About his wife, who had died 5 years ago. About every person on Earth who was depending on him to make the right choice. The answer is no. Humanity does not surrender. Zarthek's expression didn't change. So be it. Your species will serve as an example to all others who might think to defy the Council. The transmission ended. All ships, Kyle said into the fleet-wide channel. This is Admiral Bennett. Battle stations. They wanted a fight. Let's give them one they'll remember. Jake Morrison was already in position aboard the Defiance, positioned near Jupiter Station with the main battle group. 50 human ships against 200 council vessels. The math was terrible. But humans had won against worse odds before. Enemy fleet is moving, reported Chris Walker. They're spreading out. Looks like they plan to surround us. They're overconfident, Jake said. He smiled. Good. Use that. All ships, implement Plan Delta. Let's show them what happens when you underestimate humans. The council ships came forward in perfect formation, their weapons charging. They moved like they were on parade, not going into battle. Jake had seen that kind of arrogance before. It usually got people killed. Fire, he ordered. The space between the two fleets lit up with weapons fire. Human railguns launched projectiles at incredible speeds. Missiles streaked across the darkness. The council ships returned fire with energy weapons that turned space itself bright blue. The first human ship died within seconds, torn apart by concentrated fire. Then, a second, a third, but the council was learning something. Human ships didn't fight fair. They didn't stay in formation. They scattered, weaving through the battlefield like insects, impossible to pin down. And they were carrying weapons the council had never seen before. Engineer Amy Peterson watched from her station on Mars as her creations went to work. She had spent the last 30 days designing weapons specifically to hurt the council. Nuclear mines hidden inside asteroids, drones programmed to kamikaze into enemy ships, and her masterpiece, railguns that could fire projectiles at 30% light speed. Firing solution locked on their flagship, her assistant reported. Fire everything, Amy said. 3 projectiles launched from hidden positions in the asteroid belt. At that speed, they were invisible until impact. The first one missed. The second one grazed the flagship's shields. The third one punched straight through and tore a hole in the ship's hull. Aboard his fighter, Ben Harris saw the flagship stagger. All fighters, on me. Hit them while they're hurt. 60 human fighters broke formation and dove toward the damaged flagship. The council's defensive fire was desperate now, no longer perfect and organized. Ben's fighter shook as energy blasts passed close enough to fry his shields, but he kept going. Fox 3, he shouted, launching his missiles. Hundreds of missiles from dozens of fighters all converged on the flagship at once. The massive ship's shields flickered, failed, and disappeared. Then, the missiles hit home. Explosions rippled across the hull. Atmosphere vented into space. The flagship began to drift. Powerless, Jake watched from the Defiance as the council fleet started to break apart. Their perfect formation was gone. Ships were pulling back, confused. They had never been hurt like this before. All ships, press the attack. Kyle's voice came over the channel. Don't give them time to think. But the council was adapting. Their ships began to fight dirty too, targeting human ships with concentrated fire. The battle turned into chaos. Ships on both sides were dying, burning, breaking apart. On Earth, billions of people watched the battle through every camera they could access. They saw human ships explode. They saw council vessels crippled. They saw Commander Ben Harris's fighter get hit, spin out of control, and somehow keep flying anyway. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the council fleet retreated beyond Saturn, leaving behind 80 destroyed ships. Humanity had lost 19 vessels. Jake slumped in his command chair, exhausted. Around him, his crew looked the same. They had won, but it didn't feel like victory. Too many friends were dead. Captain, Lisa said quietly, we're receiving transmissions from all over the galaxy. Everyone saw what happened here. And some species are calling us monsters. Others are calling us heroes. The Council is declaring us a galactic threat. They're calling for full mobilization of all member species. Jake closed his eyes. They had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. On Axis Prime, Zarthek stood before the full council. His flagship was crippled. 80 ships were destroyed. And for the first time in 10,000 years, A council fleet had been forced to retreat. "How?" demanded one of the other council members. "How did primitives do this to us?" Zarthek's expression was dark. "They did not fight with honor. They used weapons designed only to kill. They sacrificed their own ships without hesitation. They fight like animals, without regard for the civilized rules of war." "Then we must show them what civilized warfare truly means," said another council member. Back on Earth, Admiral Bennett stood before the Planetary Council. Every nation's leader was present, their faces appearing on screens around the room. "They're coming back," he said. "With everything they have. Intelligence suggests at least 2,000 ships." The room fell silent. "Can we win?" asked the President of North America. Kyle thought about the battle they had just fought, about the ships they had lost, about the Council's resources compared to humanity's. Honestly, no. Not in a straight fight. They'll overwhelm us with numbers. "Then what do we do?" asked another leader. Kyle looked at each face on the screens. Then he smiled, and there was something fierce in his expression. "We don't fight fair. We don't fight honorably. We fight to win. We take the war to them, hit their supply lines, raid their worlds, make them hurt until they decide we're not worth the cost." Nina Clark spoke up from her position. "And we'll lose millions." "Yes," Kyle agreed. "But we'll be free. And that's worth any price." Across Earth, the vote was unanimous. Humanity would fight. In orbit above Mars, Amy Peterson was already designing new weapons. On Jupiter Station, Ben Harris was training new fighter pilots. Aboard the Defiance, Jake Morrison was planning raids deep into Council territory. The Council thought they had seen humanity's strength. They were wrong. They had only seen humanity angry. They were about to see humanity determined. 3 months after the first battle, humanity was losing. Not in any single fight, but in the slow, grinding way that numbers always won against courage. The Council's Grand Fleet was gathering, 2,000 ships from 6 different species, all preparing to crush Earth once and for all. Captain Grace Sullivan watched through her ship's sensors as a Council supply convoy passed through the sector. Her vessel, the ESV Shadow, was humanity's first stealth ship, invisible to most scanning technology. She had been hunting Council supply lines for weeks now. 3 freighters, 2 escorts, reported her second in command. "Weapons are locked." Grace nodded. "Fire." Missiles launched from the Shadow, striking before the Council ships even knew they were under attack. The freighters exploded, scattering supplies across space. The escorts tried to find their attacker but saw nothing. By the time they figured out where the Shadow had been, Grace was already jumping to hyperspace. It was working. All across Council space, human strike teams were causing chaos. They destroyed supply depots. They mined hyperspace routes. They attacked convoys and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. The Council had never fought this kind of war before, but it wasn't enough. Jake Morrison knew it as he stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking at intelligence reports. The Council's main fleet would reach Earth in 2 weeks. When it did, no amount of guerrilla tactics would save them. "Captain," Lisa said, approaching with a datapad. "I've been analyzing the information we've gathered from Council communications. There's something strange." "Strange how?" She pulled up a holographic display showing the Council's member species. "Look at the power structure. 3 species, the Velkari, the Horeth, and the Kranel, they control everything. The other 9 species have almost no say in decisions. They're forced to contribute ships and resources, but get nothing in return." Jake studied the display. "You're saying some of them might not want to be part of this?" "I'm saying some of them might be slaves wearing chains made of laws and treaties." The idea hit Jake like lightning. "We need to talk to Admiral Bennett." 2 days later, small human ships began appearing in systems controlled by the minor Council species. Instead of attacking, they broadcast messages. The same message, repeated in every known language. "We are humanity. We fight for our freedom against the Galactic Council. We know many of you fight not by choice, but by force. We know you are slaves to species who call themselves your betters. We offer you a choice. Join us. The council went into panic mode. They tried to jam the transmissions, but humanity had already seeded the messages across thousands of systems. Billions of beings heard the offer. Most ignored it. The council had ruled for 10,000 years. Rebellion seemed impossible, but some listened. The first species to break away were the Talmir, a race of small, insect-like beings who had served the council for 3,000 years. Their representative contacted Earth directly. "We heard your message," they said through a translator. "We want to be free, but we are weak. The council will destroy us." Ambassador Nina Clark took the call personally. "Then we'll protect you. Stand with us. Together we're stronger." The Talmir agreed. Then the Felkor joined, bringing their knowledge of council military tactics. Then the Zenri, who contributed advanced medical technology. The Free Species Coalition was born. The council was furious. Zarthek himself broadcast a message to the rebel species. "You have chosen death. We will make examples of your worlds. All will see what happens to traitors." He wasn't lying. The council fleet diverted 300 ships to attack the Talmir homeworld. Dr. Matt Chen watched the attack from his research station. Helpless, as the bombardment began, the council wasn't trying to conquer. They were trying to kill everything. "We need to do something," Matt said to Admiral Bennett over the communication line. "We don't have ships there. We can't help them." Matt looked at the experimental shield technology he had been developing. It wasn't ready. Testing showed a 50% chance of catastrophic failure. But doing nothing guaranteed the Talmir would die. "I have an idea," he said. "But it's dangerous." "Everything's dangerous now," Kyle replied. "What do you need?" 6 hours later, Matt's experimental shield generators were loaded onto fast transport ships and rushed to the Talmir homeworld. They arrived just as the bombardment intensified. Matt worked frantically, setting up the generators while council ships fired on the planet. "This is insane," one of his assistants shouted over the sound of explosions. "These shields might not work." "They'll work," Matt said, though he wasn't sure at all. "They have to." He activated the generators. Energy fields spread across the planet's major cities, shimmering and unstable. Council weapons hit the shields and were absorbed, deflected, scattered. The bombardment continued, but now the cities were protected. The council fleet tried for 3 more hours before giving up and retreating. They had failed to destroy the Talmir, but they succeeded elsewhere. 2 other rebel species were exterminated before they could be protected. Entire worlds turned to lifeless rocks. The message was clear. This is what rebellion costs. It should have broken the coalition. Instead, it made them angry. General Ryan Cole was leading Earth's ground forces when the council made their move. 2,000 ships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system, massive and terrible. This was it. The final battle. "All ships to defensive positions," Admiral Bennett ordered. "Ground forces, prepare for planetary invasion." The council fleet came forward slowly, taking their time. They knew they had already won. The battle began at dawn over North America. Council ships descended into Earth's atmosphere, their weapons tearing through cities. Human fighters rose to meet them, outnumbered 100 to 1. The sky turned bright with explosions. Ryan led his troops through the burning streets of New York, fighting council ground forces that had landed in Central Park. The aliens were bigger, stronger, and better equipped, but they had never fought humans on their own ground before. "Fall back to the subway," Ryan shouted as energy blasts tore through buildings. "Use the tunnels." The battle turned into brutal urban warfare. Council forces expected a conventional fight. Instead, humans used every dirty trick they knew. Ambushes from sewers, bombs hidden in abandoned cars, snipers firing from ruined buildings. The council troops started taking casualties they didn't expect. In space, the situation was worse. Human ships were being destroyed faster than they could be replaced. Jake Morrison watched from the Defiance as ship after ship died, their crews lost forever. "We can't hold them," Chris Walker said quietly. Jake knew he was right. But surrender wasn't an option. "All ships," he said over the fleet channel. "Target their flagship. If we're going down, we're taking that bastard Zarthek with us." Every surviving human ship turned toward the massive Council flagship. They charged forward, firing everything they had, ignoring their own safety. It was suicide. It was desperate. It almost worked. The flagship's shields collapsed under the assault. Dozens of missiles struck home. The ship began to list, damaged. But there were too many other Council ships. Human vessels exploded one after another. The Defiance took hit after hit, systems failing. Then something unexpected happened. Talmir ships appeared at the edge of the system, followed by Felkor vessels and Zenri fighters. The coalition had arrived. "All human forces," came a voice over the channel, speaking awkward English. "We stand with you. We fight together." The tide didn't turn. The Council still had overwhelming numbers. But humanity wasn't alone anymore. And that changed everything. The battle raged for 2 days. When it finally ended, the Council fleet retreated, but they had taken massive losses. Earth was damaged but not destroyed. Millions were dead, but billions survived. As the sun rose over the ruins of New York, Ryan Cole stood among his troops, exhausted but alive. Around him, human and alien soldiers sat together, sharing water and medical supplies. Kyle Bennett's voice came over every communication device on Earth. "This is Admiral Bennett. The enemy has retreated. We held. Together with our allies, we held." On the bridge of the Defiance, Jake looked at the damage reports. They had lost over half their fleet. Earth was scarred. The price had been terrible, but they had survived. And the Council, for the first time in 10,000 years, had failed to conquer a world they had targeted for destruction. Lisa appeared beside him, her arm in a sling from the battle. Jake looked out at Earth, burning but unbroken. "Now we stop playing defense. Now we take this fight to them." 6 months had passed since the Battle of Earth. The war had changed. What started as humanity's desperate fight for survival had become something bigger. Something the galaxy had never seen before. Ambassador Kate Rivers stood in the assembly hall on the Talmir homeworld, watching representatives from 7 different species argue in a dozen languages. The Free Species Coalition had grown. More species had broken away from the Council, inspired by humanity's refusal to surrender and Earth's survival against impossible odds. But keeping the alliance together was harder than fighting the war. "The Velkari are blockading our trade routes," said the Felkor representative, his translator making his angry clicks sound like shouting. "Your human ships promise to protect us." "We have 50 ships," Kate replied calmly. "The Council has thousands. We're doing everything we can. Everything is not enough." Kate took a deep breath. She had been a diplomat for 20 years, but this was different. These species had different values, different needs, different fears. The only thing holding them together was hatred of the Council and hope that freedom was possible. "Then we need to hit them harder," said a new voice. Everyone turned. Captain Alex Stone had entered the room, still wearing his uniform from the ESV Retribution, humanity's newest and most powerful battleship. He was young for a captain, only 30. But he had earned his rank through action, not politics. "Captain Stone," Kate said carefully, "this is a diplomatic session." "I know. But the Felkor representative is right. Defense isn't working. We need to attack. Specifically, we need to attack Velkar Prime." The room fell silent. Velkar Prime was the homeworld of the Velkari Empire, the most powerful species in the Council. It was defended by hundreds of ships and planetary weapons that could destroy fleets. "That's suicide," said the Zenri representative, quietly. Alex smiled. Everyone said attacking Earth was suicide too. But we're still here. The Council rules through fear. They make everyone believe they're unbeatable. We need to prove they're not. Kate studied the young captain. She had read his service record. 3 ship commands. All surviving missions that should have killed everyone aboard. He was either incredibly lucky or incredibly good. You have a plan? I have the beginning of one. But I need your help to finish it. 2 weeks later, Commander Dan Price was leading his special operations team through the ventilation systems of a Council research station. The station orbited a dead moon on the edge of Council space, supposedly abandoned. Intelligence suggested otherwise. "Movement ahead," whispered one of his team members. Dan held up a hand, and they all froze. Through the grating beneath them, they could see Council security guards patrolling. The team waited until they passed, then kept moving. Their mission was simple in theory. The Council kept all their sensitive data on secure servers at key locations. This station was one of them. If Dan's team could access those servers, they might find information that could help win the war. They reached the server room an hour later. Dan placed the hacking device that Lisa Chang had designed and waited. Minutes felt like hours as the device worked through the Council's security. "Got it," whispered his tech specialist. "Downloading everything." "Everything. How long?" 5 minutes. Dan checked his chronometer. They had been inside for 40 minutes. Sooner or later, someone would notice the guards they had stunned. "We might not have 5 minutes. Then we better get lucky." They got 4 minutes before alarms started blaring. Dan grabbed the device, stuffed it into his pack, and the team ran. Council soldiers poured into the corridors behind them. Weapons firing. One of Dan's team members went down. Then another. "Keep moving," Dan shouted. They reached their extraction point as their ship descended through the station's hangar bay, weapons blazing to keep Council forces back. Dan and the 3 surviving members of his team jumped aboard as the ship lifted off. "Did you get it?" the pilot asked. Dan pulled out the data device. "Yeah." Back on Earth, Lisa Chang spent 3 days analyzing the stolen data. What she found changed everything. "Admiral," she said, calling Kyle Bennett to her research facility. "You need to see this." Kyle arrived with Nina Clark and Jake Morrison. Lisa pulled up holographic displays, showing communications between Council leaders. "The Council has been lying for 10,000 years, she said. "About everything. Their peace? It's enforced through assassination. Any species that develops faster than light travel gets visited by Council agents. The leaders are killed and replaced with puppets. Any species that refuses is destroyed completely." "We already suspected that," Jake said. "That's not all. The Council doesn't maintain peace because they value it. They maintain it because they're afraid. 8,000 years ago, there was another species. The Zarketh. They were more advanced than any current Council race. They refused to join. The Council, back when they only had 3 member species, allied together and destroyed them. Completely. Erased them from history." Nina leaned forward. "Why does that matter?" "Because the Council has been terrified ever since that another species might appear who could challenge them. That's why they have all these rules. That's why they crush anyone who gets too powerful. The entire Council structure is built on fear. They're not strong. They're paranoid." Kyle stared at the data. "Can we prove this?" "All the proof is right here. Communications. Orders. Historical records. They thought were destroyed. Then we broadcast it. We show the entire galaxy what the Council really is." Over the next week, the stolen data was broadcast across every system in Council space. Billions of beings learned the truth. The Council's foundation began to crack. 3 more species joined the coalition, then 5 more, then 12. But the Council wasn't going to surrender. Zarthek made an announcement that was heard across the galaxy. "The humans and their allies have spread lies and poison. They have corrupted the order we have maintained for millennia. This cannot stand. We are constructing the Void Hammer, a weapon that will end this rebellion absolutely. In 30 days, Earth will be destroyed. Every rebel world will follow. Order will be restored. On the bridge of the Retribution, Alex Stone read the message and felt his blood run cold. A planet killer. They're building a planet killer. Can we stop them? Asked his tactical officer. Alex thought about the weapon, about what it would mean, about the billions of people on Earth who would die if it fired. We can try. Gather the fleet. All of it. Every ship. From every coalition species. Kate Rivers spoke up from her position. Even if we gather every ship, we'll be outnumbered. The Council has concentrated their forces around Axis Prime, where they're building this weapon. I know. So what's the plan? Alex looked at the star map. At Axis Prime, glowing in the center, the Council's capital world, the heart of their power, defended by 5,000 ships. We do what humans do best, he said quietly. We charge straight at something that should kill us and hope we're too stubborn to die. Jake Morrison joined the meeting remotely. You're talking about a direct assault on Axis Prime. Yes, that's insane. I know. Good. Because if we're going to do something insane, we should at least admit it. Jake smiled grimly. When do we leave? 3 days. That's how long it will take to gather all our ships. It's not enough time to plan properly. We don't have enough time. We either attack now while they're building the weapon, or we wait for them to finish and destroy Earth. Kyle Bennett's voice came through the communication. The Earth Council has authorized the mission. All human military assets are at your disposal, Captain Stone. Alex felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders. He was leading an attack that would probably fail, an attack where most of them would die. But it was the only chance they had. All ships, he broadcast across the Coalition fleet. Prepare for hyperspace jump. Destination: Axis Prime. We're going to end this war. On Earth, people watched as the fleet gathered. Over 1,000 ships, humans and aliens fighting together. It wasn't enough. Everyone knew it wasn't enough. But they were going anyway. Dan Price checked his weapons aboard the Retribution. His mission was clear. If they could get close to the Void Hammer, his team would board it. They would try to disable it, or capture it. Ready? Asked Alex, stopping by the armory. As ready as I'll ever be, sir. Good. Because I'm pretty sure we're all about to die. Dan laughed despite himself. Probably. But at least we'll die doing something that matters. Foreman, the fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying humanity's hopes and the Coalition's dreams. They were heading into the largest battle the galaxy had seen in 10,000 years. None of them expected to survive. But all of them knew one thing: they were going to make it count. The fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Axis Prime system, and everyone aboard every ship had the same thought. They were going to die here. 5,000 council ships hung in formation around the planet. A wall of metal and weapons that stretched across space. In the center, visible even from this distance, was the Void Hammer. The massive weapon was still under construction, surrounded by building platforms and energy shields. But it was nearly complete. All ships, Captain Alex Stone said over the fleet-wide channel, his voice steady despite what they all faced. Remember why we're here. Remember Earth. Remember every world the Council has destroyed. Remember everyone who said we couldn't win. Today, we prove them wrong. He paused, then added, today we show them that freedom isn't given. It's taken. The Coalition fleet numbered just over 1,000 ships. They should have been terrified. Many were. But they moved forward anyway. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the Council fleet through his sensors. He had fought in dozens of battles, but nothing like this. Nothing that mattered this much. Captain, Chris Walker said quietly, we're being hailed. It's Zarthek. Put him through. The council leader's face appeared on the screen. He looked older than Jake remembered. Tired, but his eyes were still cold. "You came," Zarthek said. "I wondered if you would be that foolish." "We came to end this," Jake replied. "Surrender now. Dismantle the weapon. The council is finished." Zarthek actually laughed. "You bring 1,000 ships against 5,000 and speak of our surrender? You are either brave or insane. Both. Then you will die bravely. All of you. The weapon will fire in 6 hours. We waited for you to arrive so you could watch Earth die." The transmission ended. Alex's voice came over the channel again. "All ships. Engage at will. Hit them with everything we have." The battle began. The coalition fleet didn't try to maintain formation. They scattered immediately, becoming 1,000 individual threats instead of one large target. Human ships led the charge, firing railguns and missiles. Talmir vessels used their speed to dart between council ships. Felkor cruisers hammered away with heavy weapons. The council responded with overwhelming firepower. Space became a storm of energy blasts and explosions. Ships on both sides died within the first minute. Then, dozens more. Then, hundreds. Grace Sullivan piloted the Shadow through the chaos, her stealth ship invisible to most sensors. Her mission was simple: get close to the Void Hammer. Deploy Dan Price's Special Operations Team. "Approaching the weapon now," her pilot reported. "Council ships are everywhere. Find a gap." There's always a gap. They found one. Slipping between two massive council battleships that were too focused on larger threats to notice the small stealth ship. The Shadow dove toward the Void Hammer. "Deploying boarding team now," Grace said. Dan Price and his 12 team members shot across the gap in their assault pods, magnetic clamps pulling them toward the weapon's hull. Council defenders spotted them immediately, energy blasts cutting through space. 3 pods were destroyed before they reached the hull. Dan's pod hit hard, and he cut through the outer plating with a plasma torch. "Move, move, move," he shouted as his team poured through the breach. They were inside the Void Hammer. In the main battle, things were going badly. The coalition was simply outnumbered. For every council ship they destroyed, they lost 2 of their own. The math was brutal and simple. They were losing. Admiral Kyle Bennett watched from his command ship, trying to find any advantage. "Concentrate fire on their command ships. If we can disrupt their coordination," an explosion cut him off. A council missile had broken through the shields. The ship shook, systems failing. "Hull breach on deck 7, someone shouted. Kyle pulled himself up, blood running down his face from a cut above his eye. "Keep fighting. We don't stop until we're dead." On the Retribution, Alex was living his ship's name. The battleship tore through council formations, its heavy weapons leaving destruction in its wake. But it was taking damage too. Shield generators were failing. Hull plating was burning away. "Sir, we can't take much more of this," his tactical officer said. "We don't need to take much more. We just need to last long enough." Inside the Void Hammer, Dan and his team fought through corridor after corridor. Council security forces tried to stop them. But humans were good at fighting in confined spaces. They had trained for urban warfare, for shipboarding actions, for exactly this kind of close-quarters combat. "Engineering section ahead," said Lisa Chang's voice over his communication device. She was guiding them remotely from the Defiance. "That's where the weapons core is." They reached the engineering section, and Dan's breath caught. The weapons core was enormous. A sphere of energy contained by magnetic fields, pulsing with power. Countdown displays showed 5 hours until firing. "Can we disable it?" Dan asked. His tech specialist studied the controls. "Yes, but it will take time. And if we shut it down wrong, it might explode. Probably will. Explode. This thing has enough energy to destroy a star system. How long do you need? 30 minutes. Maybe. Dan looked at his remaining team members. 9 people, all that was left. Outside, he could hear Council security forces gathering. Then we hold for 30 minutes. Set up defensive positions. No one gets through. 70-21. 70-20-20-21. The battle outside intensified. The coalition was down to 600 ships. Then 500. Captain Grace Sullivan died when the Shadow took a direct hit, trying to provide cover for the boarding team. Commander Ben Harris ejected from his destroyed fighter, floating helpless as the battle raged around him. Jake Morrison watched ship after ship disappear from his sensors. Friends. Allies. People who trusted him to lead them. Captain, Chris Walker said, his voice breaking. The Talmir flagship just went down. The Fel Corps carrier is breaking apart. We're not going to make it. Jake knew he was right. But he also knew something else. Dan Price was still inside the Void Hammer. If they could give him enough time. All ships, Jake broadcast. New orders. Ignore everything else. Every ship concentrates on protecting the Void Hammer. Nothing gets close to it. Sir, Walker said, confused. We're supposed to destroy it. We are destroying it. From the inside. We just need to buy them time. Alex understood immediately. All ships, you heard the captain. Form up on the weapon. Make them go through us. The surviving coalition ships, less than 400 now, pulled back to form a protective shell around the Void Hammer. It was insane. They were protecting the weapon that was built to kill Earth. But it made the Council hesitate. They didn't understand what was happening. Inside the weapon, Dan fired his last magazine at another wave of Council security. How much longer? 10 minutes. We don't have 10 minutes. Council forces were pushing through. Dan's team was down to 6 people. Then, 4. Then, 2. Dan himself took a blast to the chest, his armor cracking. He fell against the wall, breathing hard. His tech specialist kept working. Almost. There. Dan raised his weapon with his good arm, firing at movement in the corridor. Come on. Come on. Got it. The specialist slapped a control. The weapon is overloading. We have maybe 3 minutes before it explodes. Then we better run. They stumbled back through the corridors, leaving 2 more team members behind who held the line so they could escape. Dan and his specialist reached their entry breach and dove out into space just as Council forces reached the engineering section. The Void Hammer exploded. The blast was beautiful and terrible. A sphere of white light that expanded across kilometers. Every ship close to it, Council and Coalition alike, was vaporized instantly. The energy wave kept expanding, throwing ships away like toys, ripping through shields and armor. When it cleared, the weapon was gone. And so were 1,000 Council ships caught in the blast. Jake Morrison pulled himself up from where the shockwave had thrown him. Status report. We're alive, Walker said, sounding amazed. Barely. But alive. Across the battlefield, the Council fleet was in chaos. They had just lost 1/3 of their forces in an instant. The Coalition, what little remained, was damaged but still fighting. Alex Stone's voice came over the channel. All ships. The weapon is destroyed. Now we finish this. All ships. Target the orbital rings around Axis Prime. If we can't beat them in space, we take away their ability to build ships. The remaining Coalition vessels, less than 200 now, dove toward the planet. The Council tried to stop them, but their formations were broken, their commanders dead or scattered. Ambassador Nina Clark broadcast across every channel in the galaxy. Her words were heard by trillions of beings on thousands of worlds. This is Nina Clark, speaking for humanity and the Free Species Coalition. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council ruled through fear and oppression. They destroyed species who wanted freedom. They enslaved the weak and crushed the strong. They built a weapon to murder billions. Today, we showed them that their reign is over. We didn't start this war, but we're finishing it. She paused, then continued. To the Council leadership. Surrender now. Dismantle your fleets. Free the species you've oppressed. Do this, and we'll let you live. Refuse, and we'll turn Axis Prime into a graveyard. You wanted to teach us a lesson. Instead, you learned one. We don't start fights, but we finish them. On the surface of Axis Prime, Zarthek watched his world burn. Orbital stations fell from the sky, trailing fire. His fleets were destroyed or scattered. The weapon that was supposed to save them had killed more Council ships than enemy vessels. He had lost. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Council had truly, completely lost. A transmission came through from what remained of his fleet. Council leader, the enemy is offering terms of surrender. Well, broed by. Zarthek closed his eyes. He thought about his empire, about the power they had held for so long, about how it had all been torn away by primitives who refused to accept their place, accept their terms. He said quietly. The battle ended. Admiral Kyle Bennett stood on the bridge of his damaged command ship, watching as Council vessels powered down their weapons and transmitted their surrenders. Around him, his crew was crying, laughing, unable to believe they were alive. On Earth, 8 billion people watched the broadcast and cheered. Dan Price floated in space, waiting for rescue, looking at the debris field that had once been the greatest battle in galactic history. His tech specialist floated nearby, both of them alive by sheer luck. We did it, the specialist said, quietly. Yeah, Dan replied. 1 month later, representatives from across the galaxy gathered on Axis Prime. The Galactic Council was officially dissolved. In its place, a new democracy was formed, where every species had an equal voice. Jake Morrison stood with Lisa Chang, watching the ceremony. They had both survived, though the Defiance had not. The ship had been too damaged and was being dismantled for parts. What will you do now? Lisa asked. Jake thought about it. I don't know. Maybe retire. Try to forget what we had to do to win. Do you think they'll remember us? The people who come after? Maybe. Probably not. But that's okay. We didn't fight for glory. We fought because someone had to. Ambassador Nina Clark addressed the new Galactic Assembly for the first time. Behind her stood representatives from dozens of species, including several from what had been the Council. We came to the stars, seeking friendship, she said. We found tyranny. We wanted peace. We were given war. But from that war, we built something better. A galaxy where freedom isn't a gift from the powerful. Where it's a right for everyone. The old order is dead. Long live the new one. Across the galaxy, billions of beings celebrated their freedom. Slaves became citizens. Oppressed species built their own ships. Species that had been enemies for millennia learned to work together. Years later, historians would call it the Liberation War. The war that changed everything. The war that proved that freedom was worth any cost. Captain Alex Stone survived and eventually became an admiral. He spent the rest of his life protecting the new democracy they had built. Dan Price went home to Earth and never spoke about the war again. Kyle Bennett retired, finally able to rest after decades of service. Jake Morrison stood on a hill overlooking the rebuilt New York City, now full of humans and aliens living together. He was old now, gray and tired, but he smiled as he watched the ships flying overhead, carrying people to stars that had once been forbidden to them. They had won. Not just the war, but the peace that followed. And that, he thought, was worth everything they had sacrificed.